Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Now, how often do you live fully in the moment when your mind is completely focused on what is happening right now, rather than worrying or ruminating on the past or overthinking about the future? Well, in this week's teaching, we're going to be exploring the huge benefits of being more in the moment. What stops you from being present in this way, and the steps that you can take to start living life more in the now. Okay, David, so we hear this term living more in the moment or living in the present a lot nowadays. But what does it actually mean?
Well, I think it's an interesting term, and especially for our model, Alex, because it kind of identifies what I would call Shen, your spirituality, the true you, the authentic you, whatever word you want to use, and that part of the mind that I like to call the inner child. And the way you described it in the introduction was very interesting, because you'll see that you view reality from two different points of view. If you're viewing it from Shen, you're more in the now, you're more connected and more able and connected with your truth. But if you're living from your inner child, now, as we'll discuss later on, the child now is now projecting ahead what could, what might, what should, or going backwards and thinking, well, if it wasn't for that, this is my justification. If they hadn't have said this. And so you get these two parts of your mind, either living in this fallacy of what could and what might happen and what should have happened, or living in the now, dealing with your life in balance, in harmony.
But to live in the now, it's a kind of it's a bit of a vague concept.
Yeah.
What I've heard you say is it's something to do with about being grounded. It's something to do with connecting to your kind of divine spiritual nature or your authentic nature. It's definitely not about letting your ego mind or your inner child guide you through life.
Exactly.
But to live in the now, is that literally just about being fully focused and attentive to what is happening right in front of us?
No, I think it's more about where your position, the way you view the world and reality is based in. Is it based in your truth, your honesty, your integrity, your Shen spirituality? And that means that then you can view it through the lens of balance and harmony. Or are you viewing it through what I call the inner child? And we've done many videos on the inner child if you're unsure of what we're talking about. But that part of your mind that you said quite rightly, some would call your ego, some would call your emotional mind, some would call your subconscious mind. Where is your view on the world? And I think I agree with you. I think that term living in the now, although there's a wonderful book I would suggest you reading. I don't agree with everything he says, but Eckhart Tolle has written a wonderful book called The Power of Now. It's well worth reading. But I think this term of living in the now can get very confusing. My interpretation, the way I would want to teach it to you, living in the now means living connected to your Shen, to your truth, to your honesty, to your integrity, living well grounded. I like the word you said, Alex, living grounded in what you know is true, not playing these flights of fantasy that the inner child runs away
Yeah,
with.
because I'm wondering, I mean, I've never heard it described in that way. You know, I've heard being in the now more about being focused in the moment of what's exactly happening now. I've never heard it described as being connected to this truth within you in the moment.
Well, I think you got. This is why I would want to make that slight difference here, because when people say, "Well, living in the now," and clients will say to me, in fact, I had one yesterday just say to me, "Well, that means I can't think about the future."
Well, this is what I was going to say.
Of course, you can think about
yeah.
the future, But you should be thinking about it from a balanced position,
Grounding ourselves
grounding.
in our truth and our reality. Because that's, I guess, a common complaint, because people would say, well, are you suggesting that I can't I can't kind of be careful and constructive about things that may happen to me in the future? Or are you saying that I can't reflect back on past events and learn lessons from them, because, living in the now means it's like living a blinkered life in a way, if we're only focused on what's happening right in front of us.
Well, that's right. You see, and both of the examples that you use there are really good examples. So the lady I was speaking to yesterday said, well, surely I can future-proof myself. And I said, well, you can't. You can't future-proof yourself, quite simply because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But what you can do, you can ground yourself to whatever does happen in the future. You can deal with it. So you don't have to build up all of these worst case scenarios and what ifs and what should and high expectations and high standards and perfection and all the things we talk about. And the same applies to the past. You can't be using the past as the excuse. As I often say in these videos, the past does not define you. What happened to you in the past, and I will admit, terrible, horrible things may have happened to you in the past, but that proves to me how awesome you are to have got through that. So you're basing your now, where you are now, as the grounding, and I want the now to be the kind of the lens that you're looking through: truth, honesty, and integrity. Not what we're going to describe in a few moments, the inner child. Because if you view it from the inner child, you will never be grounded in the now. You'll be transported into the future or stuck in the past. It's like the pendulum, you see? There's a great example of the pendulum. Swinging off into the future, what if, what could, what should, back into the past. Well, if this hadn't happened, that shouldn't have happened, that's unfair, that's unjust. And if we bring it into Wu Wei, into the now, where you can control the now, you can ground yourself in truth, honesty, and integrity. You can connect your Shen. Now you can project ahead careers, relationships, health, well-being.
Setting good intentions.
From that grounding.
Yeah. So it's actually being in the now, being grounded in our truth, being 100% clear on what our truth is, what our intentions are for our life. It's actually a very expansive, empowering place to be. It's not a blinkered state of mind.
Shall I tell you what a client said to me once, and I thought it was a great analogy. You know, I love analogies. And we were talking about this, and he's a surfer. He was a surfer from Australia. And he kind of clicked. He said, oh, it's like catching a wave and riding the wave. And it is. Living in Wu Wei is like going on, not worrying about the last wave that you didn't catch or the next wave that you might not catch, focusing on the now to surf this wave and be the best surfer that you can be, because the next wave you'll be even better, and the next wave you'll be even better.
So the message with that analogy, David, is that a case of if we can be grounded in our truth, we can be assured about our intentions, if we can be focused more in the present, then that allows us to be in the optimum flow with the universe.
Yes, that's what I would say. If you're grounded in the truth, exactly. If you're grounded in the truth, if you've learned your lessons from the past, I'm not saying forget it or shut the door. They were horrible things, and you should be aware of them, but also be aware of the lessons that you learned, and you should be having an intention about the future, but knowing without doubt that anything that comes your way, whatever wave is, you can surf it, because you're basing your life from your Shen, from that thing that makes you unique, makes you that no one in the universe likes you. I would call it awesome, makes you awesome. And that's what I would frame as living in the now. But I agree with what you've said. A lot of people misunderstand this term. So I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to give you my interpretation of what we're talking about.
And the other thing which is not mentioned so much when this topic is discussed is obviously we've talked about the inner child or the ego's tendency to look backwards into the past.
Exactly.
We've talked about the inner child's or ego's tendency to look forward and project into the future. But the other thing the inner child does is it looks sideways. It compares. So rather than being grounded in our reality, our now, the potentials on offer to us right in this moment, and catching that wave perfectly, the inner child has a tendency to look sideways and compare itself with other people.
That's right. Now, if you use the surf analogy,
Yeah.
instead of lying on your, I've never surfed, so I don't know if this is true, but lying on your surfboard and connecting to a wave, you're too busy looking at what everybody else is doing, and you miss the wave. And so that's what the inner child does. The inner child, because the inner child is not driven by reaching your potential. Even the inner child is driven by something like emotional protection. It believes, it doesn't believe yet, it creates the emotion, and it believes that it can be protected from emotions. So you're absolutely right. We call it CCJ, comparing. Have they caught the wave? I haven't caught that wave. They got a better wave than me.
Yeah.
Criticizing them, or criticize, they always get the right waves. Why don't I get the wrong wave? And poor me, look at me, it always happens to me. Or being judgmental. It's not fair. Look, I'm a better surfer than they are, and they always catch you. So the inner child gets you caught. And then in that moment, you're not in the now, you're on the carousel of despair, going round and around. Self-fulfilling prophecies, or as you say, confirmation bias. Well, look at me, I can never surf. I might as well give up surfing. My surfboard's crap. You're always looking for excuses. And that's why I was saying the nice thing about this question that somebody sent in, it really helps you to think about the two kind of filters that you're looking at your life from. The now filter, I would think, is based and grounded in reality, truth, honesty, integrity. The inner child filter is based on emotional protection, that it wants everything the way it wants it. It wants to be strokes. It wants to be the best. It wants to be, oh, crikey, how many times I've heard this, wants to be perfect. Do you say that? Only if I was perfect. See, and so the inner child now is viewing reality from a different point of view. So let me give you an example. So when you're viewing a career, instead of viewing it from truth, honesty, integrity, the inner child will be saying, yeah, well, the last boss was really bad. I wonder what this boss is like. Or, this job is not going to work out the way I want it to do. It's always picking and finding fault and looking at problems. Or what happens if they don't like me? Well, what happens if I don't get after my probation? What happens if I don't get the job? What happens if this? What happens if that? What happens if the other? Now, the difference from viewing it from a grounded place, yes, you can view those things, but you view them from a more balanced way. But if you view it from the inner child, you immediately step on the hamster's wheel, and now you get driven by your emotions.
And so what I'm kind of hearing here is that in the inner child's quest for emotional protection and to be perfect, it basically saps the joy and the potential and the opportunities and the energetic growth out of the now.
Sucks it out.
Sucks it out.
It sucks it out because it's always looking for a worst case scenario.
Or it's always looking to beat you up for things you did in the past.
It is. It's so true. The inner child is trying to keep this kind of, I call it a utopian world, a Disney world, where everything is just the way the inner child wants it. I sit with clients every day working on their worst case scenario. This is what I hear time and time again. Well, surely it's better to think the worst, because if it happens, you're prepared for it. No. If you keep thinking the worst, you're more likely for it to happen. You're not in the now. You've projected into the future. Now you project it through a lens of disaster, of problems, of issues, and then you bring in then the three lies. I'm not good enough, and the middle one, I can't cope. I wouldn't be able to cope with that, David. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. And so the inner child, instead of being in the now and viewing it from a realistic, authentic, spiritual basis, you're on this carousel where you're driven from emotions. And why subject is so important to me is, do you want to base your life and your judgments on your truth, on Shen, or do you want to be emotionally based? And I will say the majority of my clients live their life until they come across these teachings emotionally based. They make their decisions based on emotions, not only based on emotions, but based against emotions that they may or may not experience in the future or what they've experienced in the past. And therefore, they're in a kind of a dilemma, what we call the carousel of despair, that they can't get out of.
And left unchecked, that pattern of thinking can become very obsessive and create lots of red light feelings of anxiety and hopelessness.
Yes.
Whereas if we are able to keep our mind and our inner child compassionately controlled,
Balanced,
grounded and connected to our Shen, our spiritual truth, more in the moment, then we experience that sense of inner ease, peace, balance, openness, heightened awareness, almost like everything is brighter and sharper for us.
Yes.
We experience those green light feelings.
And an innate knowledge, Alex, that because you will encounter problems. This is not a teaching to say that you can live a life without issues or problems or difficult situations. You will. But if you're addressing them from the base that you just explained, you can surf through those problems easily. You can find your way through this. And this is what Wu Wei means: living in your flow, reaching your potential, flourishing. No matter what wave comes your way, you can still surf through it. But if you build it on the inner child and build it on your emotions, you can never be in the now, because you're either chasing, like I often think when I do this teaching, like a when you hang a carrot in front of a donkey and the donkey keeps on trying to grab the carrot, is you're either chasing this unreachable perfection where everything is utopian, everybody likes you, everything you touch turns to gold, everybody loves you, everybody holds you in high esteem, your expectations are always met without exception. But this is unachievable. But this is what, as you say, becomes almost addictive. The word I use is very familiar. It's a very familiar pattern. Or you keep hold of the past, the injustices, the unfairnesses, where you can say, well, if it wasn't for my family, if it wasn't for my childhood, if it wasn't for this or it wasn't for that. And what the inner child is always trying to do is to not to be accountable, not to take responsibility, and saying to you in your mind, well, I'm trying to protect you, I'm trying to keep you safe. But they're doing the opposite, because when you're in your flow, that's where you're actually being authentic and being the real you. And so this is why this teaching is a difference of being in the now can be misleading. But being in the now means connecting to the reality, the now, the reality of who you are and the universe that we live in. That is how I would describe living in the now.
So in order to achieve this, David, do we need to, what's the priority? Should the priority be breaking away from following the inner child's narrative in terms of our self-talk? Or should the priority be connecting more and grounding ourselves more to our Shen nature, our spiritual nature, or a bit of both?
Well, the direct answer to that is connecting to the Shen, connecting to your Shen. So you view your life, reality, your family, your career, yourself through the eyes of your Shen. But the deeper question to that, and why we do these videos, is that part of your mind that we call the inner child is you, and it needs help. It's not a monster. It's not evil. It's not the devil. It's not fighting you. It's not against you. It's just something that you need to embrace and bring together. And that really is what Taoism is about. Bringing this part of your mind that is fixated on keeping safe. That's why you, as you say, you get addicted to worrying and fretting and maybe OCD or eating too much or drinking too much and using your excuses. This is the inner child desperately frozen in time. And the work of what we try and share with you here is to bring him back together. So there is not a dual belief,
So,
what we call a dual belief.
so when you say bringing the inner child and our Shen spiritual nature together as one,
Together as one.
rather than
That's
the
a
inner
one.
child pulling apart
That's
with a
right.
different kind of agenda.
That's right. So you cannot have two agendas. You
Yeah.
cannot, because that's hypocritical. You cannot say, well, I wouldn't say this to anybody else, but it's okay for me.
Yeah.
Or I know this is wrong. This is what I hear every day. I know it's wrong, but, well, if you know it's wrong, then why'd you do it? Because the inner child's in control. And inside of your head, instead of having one focus of being in the now, being grounded, you've got two. And you're working like a table tennis game in your head, ping-ponging towards each other, or probably a better description, a proper analogy is a tug of war, like a fight inside your head. Who's in control of the viewing? And if that fight, then you cannot be in the now. You're not in the now. You're in your own little world. That's not the now of reality. You see? And so if you have this fight every day, every decision, where the inner child says, well, let's go down that road, and you're saying, well, that doesn't work. And then you've got the fight. You're not in the now.
And you're wasting your energy as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why clients will come to us and they'll say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I can't see, I'm going around the carousel every day. I wake up feeling tired. I wake up with red light feelings. I wake up with being anxious. I'm always lying awake, what we talk about, the 3 a.m. mind. Oh my God, wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning. If you want to hear that inner child at its best, wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and listen to what it's saying to you. And listen to how powerful it is as well. Never underestimate the power of the inner child. And so that's why you really have to connect to the now to answer its questions. Because I think when people come to me, that's all I really do. I listen to the inner child and I answer its questions. And no one has ever done that. No one's ever engaged in that part of the mind and answered the question to stop this fight. And then when you stop the fight and you bring the inner child and Shen together as one, now you can be in the now, because you haven't got this dual belief system, this tug of war, this inner conflict. Perfect, yes.
So, well, we've done lots of teachings on inner child reparenting, which will help you with this topic.
And we're going to do a long series.
And we're going to do like a mini series of almost like introductory issues and topics to help you understand the inner child and inner child work and reparenting. But in the meantime, I'll put links in the show notes to all the teachings we've done on this topic to help you with this. The other thing you mentioned is connecting to Shen. So we do the inner child reparenting work, but we also want to get more familiar, build a stronger bond, a clearer line of communication, if you like, with our spiritual energy, our spiritual self, our Shen. Would you say that doing some sort of daily meditation or mindfulness practice will, as a kind of a reminder to help us build that relationship up, works?
Personally, I would.
Yeah.
Personally, I would. I call it meditation, and I do not mean sitting cross-legged for hours and hours. I mean, for me, meditation means focusing your mind. And I want you to focus your mind on truth, honesty, and integrity. I want that to have the highest priority, that you would never, under any circumstances, for anyone, let go of your integrity. So for me, it will mean 10, 15 minutes a day, sitting quietly, perhaps reviewing what you did yesterday or last week and thinking, was I always honest? Was I always truthful? Was acting with integrity? That's how I would do it. But some people say they find that difficult. But you can be focused in walking, you can be focused in riding your bicycle, swimming. You can be focused in many ways, but it is about controlling your mind and not allowing the inner child part of you to take over. So, learning how to communicate, and as Alex said, we've done many videos, how to communicate with your inner child. Because for many of my clients, what they do, they shut the inner child away. They almost don't want to hear it. They almost say, well, I don't want to dig it up. I want to leave it alone. But you can't, because it's your mind. So it's always active. It's always coming up. You've got to learn how to communicate with it. And what I would say is be truthful, honest, and integrity, and answer its questions. That's really when people come to me and we break through the first, and we get to the core of the problem. It's them almost channeling their inner child, as if you're on to me speaking to that part of the mind and trying to answer the questions, that how they deal with unfairness, injustice, when things go wrong, that they believe, when expectations, when people don't meet their expectations, when they've had injustices done to them, how do they deal with that? And that really brings it together. That's the process of being in the now, of being realistic, of living in reality, not living in some fairy story based on emotions.
Exactly. Thank you, David. And I'll also put links in the show notes too. We've done a series of gentle guided meditations, really nice, simple, straightforward ones, which may help you with this idea of just having that 10, 15-minute pause in the day to calm your mind, control your mind, focus your mind. So I'll put a link to our guided meditation playlist. And I'll also put a link in the show notes to our Shen playlist. So you can, if you're unfamiliar with the concept of the spiritual self and what it means and why it's so powerful and important, you can learn more about Shen from that teaching playlist as well. I really hope you have enjoyed this teaching. Please do let us know what you think, and perhaps also share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works with clients all over the world every week by video call. And so if you'd like to learn more about David's consultations on any of the issues we've talked about today, I will put a link in the show notes below so you can learn more about David's sessions as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.